Background noises, please.
Welcome to the third Greek Scientist Society Symposium. Leveraging the soft power of the global Hellenic community towards the Greek and Cypriot Next Generation Innovation Ecosystems 5.0.
At this point, we would like to introduce the speakers of our final panel, who will talk to us about why Greeks are successful in the life sciences sector and how we can incorporate our distinctive talent to the dawn of the Greek biopharma innovation. Again, as a reminder, you can share your thoughts and questions on the Q&A and comment section. Our speakers for this session are Alternate Minister of Health Mina Gaga, Professor Sofia Karagiannis, who is Professor of Translational Cancer Immunology and Immunotherapy at King's College London, Professor George Vassiliou, who is a Professor of Hematological Medicine at the University of Cambridge, Professor John Quackenbush, who is a Professor of Computational Biology and Bioinformatics and Chair of the Department of Biostatistics at the Harvard School of Public Health, and of course, Professor Stylianos Adonarakis, Professor and Chairman of Genetic Medicine at the University of Geneva Medical School. The moderator of this session is Dr. Pantelis Theocharous, who is Global Vice President, Cell and Gene Therapy Strategy Lead at PPD, and member of the Greek Scientist Society Scientific Advisory Board. As a senior level industry executive in prior chief marketing officer roles and a cancer immunotherapy expert, Dr. Theocharous has led multiple hematology-oncology assets in clinical development, including innovative immuno-oncology technologies. He also has a successful track record of significant executive-level client consultation and strategic advisement, including leadership and influence at CEO and biotech board levels as a non-executive director with change management experience, as well as demonstrable experience of directing programs across organizational boundaries and within large, complex, multidisciplinary organizations. So, Dr. Theocharous, I'm passing on to you so you can start the session.
So thank you very much for the introduction, and just acknowledge also and to thank the organisers of the symposium today. The Zacharis and team, I think, have done a fantastic job. It's been an excellent symposium today with some fantastic sessions and speakers that really do touch on very critical points around really the premise of today's symposium from a much broader sort of segment and overview. I'm really quite, honoured to be part of the panel presentation today. I will moderate the session today, and as I've mentioned, we have a distinguished panel that will really share, expert viewpoints and opinions, and I think that's what's really going to make, the panel discussion interactive, stimulating, and informative. I think there will be different viewpoints, and we'll certainly try to extrapolate that from the presentations and from the discussion today. Let me just start from, really sort of setting a little bit of the scene, and then I'll pass over to each panel member to take a slightly different approach in comparison to maybe some of the other panel sessions today, to give a personal viewpoint on your achievements, your areas of focus, and how that really relates to the theme of today's panel presentation and session and focus. science. But let me just start off by, again, as I'd mentioned, really setting the scene. The summary for today is why Greeks are successful in the life sciences sector, and how can we incorporate our distinctive talent to the dawn of the Greek biopharma innovation. Just some introductory sort of viewpoints and comments from my perspective. Many of our academics worldwide are in the life sciences sector, both in terms of academic accomplishment, but also certainly executive leadership positions within biopharma in a much broader sense. Success is measured by human resource, and we need to learn to navigate the multidisciplinary process. There is research excellence in Greece, and that is realized. But we have to realize an interface role. And what I mean by that is the continuum. And we've heard this in other panel discussions between academia, pharma, and biotech, even in terms of tech transfer and spin-off. We need to promote and inspire our young scientists. And I want to be able to draw from that in today's discussion. We need to continuously improve. But how will we manage to excel in these areas and sustain efforts? And I think those are just some thoughts and comments from my perspective. But I think the foundation is we have the raw materials. We have talented students of high caliber, young scientists with optimism, with scientific vision, the right behaviors, and the necessary mentality. This will be a collective approach in leveraging the support of our governments, fellowships, and industry as part of almost implementing reforms. And let me sort of just start, and then I'll pass the baton over to other members of my panel. As a young Greek Cypriot scientist, I was always curious around science. I wanted to be part of developing big scientific ideas and then implement them in terms of translational research and for the benefit of patients. And I think over the years, I've been honored and humbled to be in roles in both academic and clinical settings, but also in biotech, biopharma, and large clinical research organizations. We have to be able to give back, and that's certainly how we can maintain ourselves as role models for our young scientists. So as I'd mentioned, I'd love to now sort of just pass the baton over to each and every member of the panel in a sort of 2 to 3 minute monologue, just to share your areas of focus, your specialisms, your areas of work, and how does that translate to our panel discussion and our themes today. And then move into a case study, which I can present to stimulate discussion and viewpoints, and to again, allow us to have an interactive, productive, and informative discussion. But Mina, maybe I can start with you in terms of, you know, your accomplishments. And I think, again, I'm honored to be part of this panel today. But let me start off with you today in terms of your personal viewpoints.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm also honored to be part of this panel today, and I wish to thank all the organizers for the invitation. I'm a pulmonologist by training. I graduated medical school and did my residency and PhD in Athens, and then worked for 2 years at the National Heart and Lung Institute in London, which is now part of Imperial College, doing clinical work, but also research in the field of allergy and clinical immunology. And to be honest, the work environment was so good that hadn't I been married already and my husband was in Athens, I wouldn't have gone back. Because, I mean, as a doctor, I probably have better chance than a scientist, but still things in Greece are far more difficult for a doctor or a scientist than they are in the UK, or they are in the States, or in many other parts of the world. So working here, I was involved in the European Respiratory Medicine Society, the ERS, and I've worked with people from all sorts of academia around Europe, but also the world. So I've been to the States, to Latin America, you name it, Australia, whatever. And what I can see and tell you is that things work much more paved in most of the European countries. There's a lot more funding for research. There's a lot more organized background and facilities. Big pharma is in sort of Switzerland, in the UK, in Germany, but not in Greece, although we are taking steps. We have companies like Demo who's sponsoring today's event, but also and other Greek companies who do research and innovation. But also now we have hubs from international pharmaceutical industry that can help. But still, the things in Greece are far more bureaucratic. We lose a lot of potential on clinical studies, and chances for a scientist to work are fewer in Greece than they are in most of the European countries or in the States. And nowadays, even China has gone out with a lot of potential for a young scientist. So I think academia, for example, has a lot more funding in Europe than it has in Greece, although things are changing, and with the funds now, we hope to do better. So I've worked with the European Respiratory Medicine Society, and now I'm part of the Greek government as an alternate Minister of Health. And what I would like to do, Greece has also had the problem of 10 years of financial crisis, and on top of that, 2 years of the coronavirus, same as in every other countries. But this has stopped innovation, this has stopped changes, because you can't work in a system that is really overcome by this coronavirus pandemic and crisis. So I think we have a lot of steps to take to make the country far more attractive for scientists, young scientists. We do have a lot of bleeding towards many other countries. The UK, although now with the Brexit, things are a little better for Greece, but worse for Greek scientists, but many other European countries, because it's a free pass to every other country. We also now have a lot of competition from Cyprus, especially for doctors, because the salaries are far higher and there's more work security. So there are a lot of steps we can take. And if we discuss it later on, I don't know if you want me to discuss some of the things we're changing now in Greece, but we still have a long way to go to be really attractive and to keep all our young talent in Greece. I do believe very firmly that people have to move around. They have to see how other countries and other cultures work, how other universities work. It helps. And it's nice to have mobility and move people from other countries to Greece and from Greece to other countries, Cyprus among them. But I think we still have a long way to go to make clinical studies far easier to perform. We have a lot of potential. We have a lot of patients. We have a lot of very good doctors and centers, but we're still very bureaucratic. There's a new plan for universities to fund about 250 PhDs with a budget of 36 million euros, which is not bad for the Greek state. And this is starting now. Half of it is sponsored by the industry, and this is a very good thing, because I think in whatever we do, we need to be together with the industry, the pharma industry, the technology industry, digital information, and Greeks are doing very well there, as they do in pharma, actually. And in my field, in medicine, we also need to incorporate the patients as well, because what we produce at the end of the day is what they need and what they will require. So I think this is what I want to say as a sort of first step, and then we can continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've really touched on some critical points there. Maybe we can also relate them to the case study, as we kind of discussed the case study. But I think that's an excellent start. Thank you. And just linking to that, so Stylianos, let me come to you next, because I think some of the data that you shared with us could also be very relevant to this part of the conversation. So, but please, why don't you, give us that, that introduction from your perspective.
Can't hear you.
You're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Well, I also thank you for the invitation, and I'm delighted to participate in this conference. I'm a medical geneticist, or somebody who practices the research and practice of genetic medicine. My scientific home now is the University of Geneva. I'm a professor of genetic medicine, and I was graduated from the University of Athens in 1975, and then I did pediatrics for a while, and then I asked the question, for a young physician who wants to contribute to medicine and excuse me for the youth dreams, to change the world, what should I do? And there was a big unknown at the time. The big unknown was the genome. So I said, that's me. I work on this. And so I went to the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, where it was one of the centers of genetics at the time, and stayed there for about 15 years, became a full professor with tenure. And then we decided to move back to Europe for one simple reason, that the coffee is better in Europe. And we landed in the middle of Europe, University of Geneva, because I saw the opportunity to develop my own school, if you wish. And my main interest is the impact of the knowledge of the genome in health and disease and the economy. And my research is the linking of the genomic variability with the phenotypic variability, with different phenotypes, disorders, and traits. For administrative jobs, I was the president of the European side of human genetics for a while, and the president of HUGO, which is an international organization for the genome research. And the main goal of this organization is and was the genomic equity throughout the world. And we basically worked with the countries outside of Europe and North America. And I participated in many research projects. I will not bother you with this. But if you ask me, in my career, what was the most important item for the development and the success, I would say hire colleagues that are better than you. Because if you hire colleagues that are less good than you, then you may control them, but they don't innovate, and they don't advance the science. While if you hire people that are better than you, of course you don't control them, thank God, but they challenge you and they advance science. So actually, excellence is most important in my view than infrastructure. And with this introduction, I thank you very much again for the invitation.
Ilianos, thank you very much. And let's come back to your data as it relates to the case study. I think it's going to be very pertinent. But thank you for the introduction and the monologue. Sophia, let me maybe pass over to you. Sort of your background and an introduction to that connectivity of our theme of the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Theoharos. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me today. I'm very honored to be part of this excellent panel and this discussion. It is an item that is very much been in my heart for many, many years. As mentioned, I'm a professor of translational cancer immunology and immunotherapy at King's. I studied in Greece until the final year of secondary school. And then I moved to the United States as part of my father's work. And I finished high school in the United States. Then I moved on to study for Bachelor of Arts and Master of Science at Rutgers University. And then where I received various scholarships and teaching assistantships to complete my studies. And then I saw an opportunity studying there at Rutgers, where I really focused very much on biochemistry and basic science. I was lured by translational science. It didn't work. It didn't exist as a term at the time, but I really wanted to work on something that was applicable and was applicable to patients and had the potential to help patients and improve health. And I moved to King's College London to conduct a PhD with Professor Hannah Gould, who is international authority on IgE and allergy, and who was one of the first people to establish the role of IgE in allergy, in fact. There I received Science and Engineering Research Council scholarships, and also sponsored by SmithKline Beecham, which became GSK later, to conduct my PhD on IgE and B-cell immunology and how that relates to developing drugs to improve asthma and allergy for patient care. And I spent significant amount of my time at GSK doing research on site, which gave me an excellent insight on how research can be really linked between academic research and pharmaceutical research. I then moved on to work in another pharmaceutical company, which was a spin-out from GSK in Cambridge, where we looked at immunotherapeutic strategies for cancer. And my passion for cancer immunotherapy started around that time. And then later on, I moved on to receive an NIHR, National Institute for Health Research fellowship in 2007. And then I was completely sold on staying in academia to conduct research that really was relevant to patients, which was very much the theme of that fellowship and that fellowship scheme I had received. So my lab is very much interested to understand how B cells, the antibody factories in our body, work in the context of cancer, and to use that information to unleash the potential of therapeutic antibodies, which are now really dominating the cancer immunotherapy field and really making a difference for patients. And we apply this information to actually develop antibodies within my lab. And actually, one of our drugs has made it from concept to the clinic, opening the field for a brand new class of antibodies that can be given to patients. We completed a phase 1 clinical trial for this antibody. And in the meantime, while I was doing this, I also founded a company in 2017, which was called IGEM Therapeutics, which then was named later Epsilogen Limited. This is the first immuno-oncology company to make IgE class antibody therapeutics for cancer therapy. Alongside all of this, I decided to stay in the academic side and still link with my company and support their academic innovation. And I'm very proud that my company has completed Series A funding. They received government funding as well. And more recently, they have been able to secure a Series B funding of over £30 million. In the meantime, I've opened the field together with other colleagues, what we call oncology, which is the link between allergy, Th2 immunity, and cancer, and try to understand how this can teach both allergy and cancer fields to improve treatment for patients. So my interest in this panel is, as you can, I think it's really obvious, I have a huge interest in seeing exciting innovation for both academia and pharmaceutical and biotechnology to be linked together. This model has applied in abroad for many years, and I believe it is possible that these models can apply also in Greece. I'm very privileged to have received excellent education in Greece, but also seen the educational systems abroad in 2 continents, in the United States, but also in Europe. I live in the United Kingdom. And I teach within my university. I have a very big teaching commitment. And I'm really very happy to see how wonderful talent comes from Greece. And I really believe that all of us who moved abroad have a lot to give back to our countries, and we want to give back to our country, being very grateful for the fantastic training we have received, and wanting to really see innovation and success in Greece take off. And I think this is an opportune moment in Greek history and European history where we can really come together and make things happen. A lot of models have been seen abroad and have worked, and we think we can apply some of these models. And a lot of this work can be taken on by academics and entrepreneurs within the ecosystem abroad, and develop an ecosystem within Greece. And I really believe that this is what's missing. What's missing, the borders to be broken down, the international concept of science having no borders. I think this is where we can consider the next steps for helping Greece and Cyprus flourish. And I believe that I speak for many people that all of us want to act as ambassadors. We have been acting as ambassadors of our country abroad in one way, and we believe that we can offer something back to support Greek innovation and Greek science. And I think both basic science, translational science, biotechnology, pharmaceutics, innovation can really come together to make this happen. Maybe I can stop here and we can discuss later.
Yeah, absolutely, Sophia, thank you for that. And again, I think some really critical and important themes, as you'd mentioned: translation science, development of ecosystem and infrastructure. I think, to the point that Stylianos was making earlier as well, with regards to marrying the sort of the talent and that framework and making it very practical. And then how can we scale that, in our countries, Greece and Cyprus? So, so thank you for that introduction. Let me pass over to my very good friend, George Vassiliou. George, perspectives from your perspective, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really honored to be amongst these distinguished friends and colleagues. So I studied medicine in London. I did my primary and secondary school in Limassol in Cyprus. I finished my national service and came here to study medicine, thinking in a very narrow way I was going to train, become some sort of doctor, expert in some specialty, and return to Cyprus to offer my services to the Cypriot public. Things panned out differently. After I finished my medical school at the Royal London Hospital in London, I was fortunate enough to enter a training program to become a hematologist. As part of that, again, fortune more than skill got me to do a PhD at the University of Cambridge to study the pathogenesis of blood cancers, leukemia, and related cancers. And from then on, I have followed a primarily academic career, although I have continued throughout, and I still do now, to practice hematology, and I have patients that I look after with leukemia and related cancers. Now, I see this fortune, this opportunity as something that just happened to me, and I felt that I have to give something back. I have, throughout my time in the UK, tried to give back to Cyprus, and in 2008, together with a close friend and colleague, Bob Pavlos Kostas, we got a large European infrastructure grant to help set up the Center for the Study of Hematological Malignancies, which is based within the Karaiskagio Foundation, which is the Cypriot bone marrow registry. I would say in passing that Cyprus has by far the most registered bone marrow donors of any country. 20% of Cypriots are registered donors. The next country is about 2%. So we've taken that opportunity. We've set something up in Cyprus. I'm now chairman of the board of directors of the Center of Study of Hematological Malignancies and president of the Karaiskagio Foundation, SAB. And I've continued to help set up research, diagnosis. We do this, the center does free diagnosis for all Cypriots, Turkish and Greeks. So any patient, even from a private doctor, will get free diagnostic tests, so they're not burdened at the time of need. More recently, I was involved in a big initiative between the University of, there you can see in my slide there, the University of Cyprus, the Cyprus Oncology Center, and the Karaiskagio Foundation itself, to set up a cancer research institute in Cyprus, funded by a big charitable donation from the David Fund, the David Pinedo family, who the building is close to finishing. It will finish this year. I have already formed the first group that's part of this institute. We are recruiting more scientists and the director for the institute, and we hope that we will set up a world-leading institute in Cyprus. Certainly, my lab in Cambridge, which includes both wet lab scientists, doctors, bioinformaticians, is already formed a bridge, and people will be coming over to Cambridge to train and to return back with expertise. And my big aspiration is and this is perhaps most pertinent to what we'll discuss next, is to set up a PhD program where people can come and get a PhD from the University of Cambridge with the expectation that they will return, at least for a length of time, back to Cyprus. What they do, of course, after that is up to them. But at the very least, they will be landing back in Cyprus for a period of time in the hope that they will develop the infrastructure and the atmosphere for these things to happen. And I will finish by saying that the biggest difficulty I see in transferring expertise in biomedical research and translational research to Cyprus and to Greece to a certain extent is to create an environment where this research can thrive. And here, sitting here in Cambridge, if I have an idea, if I have a small discovery, there is people around me with expertise in all the fields I want to tap into that help me catalyze that discovery. Very recently, for example, we managed to develop a new type of drug against leukemia. I would not have stood a chance to do it in many places outside Cambridge. So I believe the expertise, the talent, the will is all there in Cyprus and in Greece. And we just have to take responsibility, as we're doing, as that fortunate Greek people of the diaspora, to try and set things up back in our countries. Thank you, Vandeli, and thank you, Edward.
Thank you, George. And again, I think some, really, again, some critical and pertinent points that we can apply and relate to the case study that we'll get to in the next few minutes. But let me also pass over to John. Maybe John, your personal kind of perspectives here as well, and again, how that kind of relates to the overarching theme of our panel discussion, please.
Certainly. So first, let me apologize for being very underdressed. My family and I have fencing lessons, and I'm going to be leaving at the end to go and fence with my wife and son. But my PhD was in theoretical physics under the guidance of Greek gentleman Terry Tomboulis at UCLA. And after working for a few years in physics, the Human Genome Project was getting underway. And so I applied for and received a fellowship to work on the Genome Project. That took me through the Salk Institute in the US, then to Stanford University, to the Institute for Genomic Research, and eventually to my current position at Harvard. I work in what we would refer to as computational and systems biology. And what I think of in this context is that every single experiment, every single enterprise that we get involved with in research really has as its primary output data. And the main question we have to ask ourselves in doing science is, if we design an intelligent experiment, how do we take those data and make sense of them? How do we understand the drivers of disease? And so I've been doing that for quite some time and would love to talk in great detail about what I do. But in the context of doing this, one of the things we've learned is that you have to be very thoughtful about how you collect and manage data as well. And so in 2012, some colleagues and I spun out a company really built around collecting these increasingly large data sets and making them accessible for people. And one of the lessons that taught me is that if you're going to try to build an enterprise, it's really important to have things that people need, not just things that are nice to have. So we always characterize what we try to do as building need-to-have technologies rather than nice-to-have technologies. But if I think more globally about the Greek students and postdoctoral fellows and colleagues and collaborators that I've had over the years, those that have returned to Greece have typically gone back because they have strong ties and institutions that can provide support for them. So Maria Klappa was a postdoctoral fellow with me, and she's now a professor leading a metabolomics unit in Greece. I have other colleagues who've gone back to work at the Hellenic Pasteur Institute, and it's really having a career path forward that they can see as being essential for bringing them back. The others who haven't gone back haven't seen that. And if I think about this in context, I think there are a few things. We think about the university positions, which we have to have, but there are far fewer of those than the number of scientists that we can train. And so thinking about this, what you really need to have is a pharmaceutical industry that can absorb some well-trained people and give them opportunities. You need a biotech, biopharma community that can absorb those. And to build those, you need a strong investment community. So there are lots of things that are in place in Greece and in Cyprus that could support this. But I think we have to think more broadly than just biology, biotech. I think we have to think about the larger ecosystem that would support this kind of work. So I have a lot more to say, but I'll stop there so we can have a panel discussion.
Yeah, John, again, I think, that really does level set against the kind of the framework, the baseline that, that we're trying to, articulate here as part of this, panel theme. So let's come back to some of those points. But, just to kind of in the interest of time, let me share the case study, because I think we can go into a little bit more depth here with regards to, some of those areas of focus. So here's the case study, and I'll just quickly go through it. So the way that I'm sort of thinking about this, and we want to sort of draw from our collective experience and viewpoints, is that we have an established diaspora scientist who wants to come to Greece or Cyprus, wants to take advantage of human capital and improve the business environment, to set up a research company that will look for precision cancer therapeutics. There's significance of IP available, experience and know-how from principal scientists to be incorporated in the new venture. The project requires skills in the latest RNA, DNA technology, and also bioinformatics skills to harvest information from genome data and translate it into living drugs with cell therapies or immunotherapies and vaccines by RNA, DNA technology. I think the aspiration is very broad, and how do we kind of think about that in terms of the framework? I think just to sort of draw on different viewpoints, and Mina, maybe I'll come to you first, and going back to some of your original comments, just thinking about that case study in mind and how we potentially how do we translate it to real terms almost, and potentially let's kind of think about the future state, about scalability. So some points and some thoughts from your side, please, Mina.
Okay, I think it's a great idea, but I think to be able to do this and translate it into a medication, or it takes an enormous number of people and technology. So I think it's a big venture. I'm not sure you can start, I mean, we can start something small, but it takes a very, very large facility and people to carry it through from thought to actually having a drug and being able to carry out all the steps that people need to take, even to the end of a clinical phase 1 trial, rather than the whole and sort of designing a study and running it requires a lot of time and a lot of people, but it's easier than actually taking it from scratch and taking from an idea and using the technology and the skills and the people that you need, because it's not just one person. I mean, you have to have the expertise in the biology and molecular biology techniques, but you also need to have the IT. And so you need a critical number of people to start. I would be happy to have that and support it, but it's not a small project. I don't know how everybody else feels. So I'll stop here and you let me, I'd like to have everybody's comment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, on the one hand, to be ambitious. On the other hand, we want to be very practical. How do we leverage these areas of focus? And how do we make such a venture a reality? And I agree with you. It takes investment and it takes process and human capital, but also the complexity of sort of clinical development and commercialization. Sophia and George, you've been involved in developing these and co-founding these, biotechs and co-ventures. How does some of that experience also relate? We have to be ambitious, but I think to the minister's point, we want to be realistic. But what about the thinking around developing this roadmap? So Sophia and George, maybe some viewpoints from your perspective.
I'm happy to start if you like. I think these are difficult ventures, and I agree with Mrs. Gaga. This is really a very difficult project in any country, let alone Greece. But I think the one thing we need to think about is I think there's 2 points from my perspective. First, you cannot have really fantastic biotech and pharma industry without having the basic and research science in place and the community, because I think that interaction is how pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries thrive with that baseline. So that, to me, is a very important element to support. So that is a starting point. But also bringing in skill from abroad and interacting with scientists around the world can also provide a lot of that support and baseline and an infrastructure or foundation, if you like, that could support those ventures, just like the case study that you just described, Dr. Theoharos. This is kind of my perspective. And in the old times, even abroad, this transversing between basic and translational science into pharma and biotechnology was impossible. But now we have fantastic models abroad that people are doing that. We have a lot of back and forth in between academic environments and biotechnology environments, not only in collaborations, but also people moving from one industry to another and being successful in these either dual roles or hybrid roles, or changing the roles and bringing these experience across in both sides. So I think, to me, to start to summarize, I think supporting basic academic and translational science is one way by which the baseline and the foundations can be developed, and reaching out to collaborate internationally, I think, can bridge a lot of the gaps that we might have in Greece. George, you have another perspective, I'm sure, to this.
I have something quite similar, but also another slight different angle as well. So I have experienced setups now increasingly where international teams are trying to build companies or trying to carry out collaborative research. I mean, a lot of the models of the European Union operating in this way. Unfortunately, Brexit is a big downer on every effort that certainly from where I'm sitting here in the UK, but I don't think that's insurmountable. So I think the one positive we're taking from the one big positive I can see from the COVID-19 pandemic is the fact that we've all learned to work remotely and interact efficiently without being in the same room or in the same building. And I do think that is where, if I were in a position where I could make things happen, that's where I would look. You know, there is a lot of good Greek scientists that they have a natural affinity and understanding with other Greek scientists, and we can help set up this particular case study, for example, could harness that potential from abroad. You know, if I was invited to contribute, for example, some input to such a company, it's fairly easy. I mean, I contribute to companies in different countries as an advisor, for example, when I'm asked to. So I think that this is where we have an opportunity, I think, to catalyze something new, but now obviously something that works well, to try and help innovate, try and provide what John called very nicely an ecosystem. So the ecosystem, again, doesn't have to be a physical ecosystem in one place. We can provide the intellectual ecosystem to try and make such a venture happen. So that's where I would put my effort at this stage.
Yeah. Thank you, Sophia. Stylianos, let me come to you, because I think you have, a very interesting viewpoint on this, and it's kind of backed up with some very interesting and pertinent data as well.
Yes. Well, I thank you very much again. My experience with the industry is not that extensive. I founded a diagnostic company, Medigenome, the Swiss Institute of Genomic Medicine, and the success of this company in Geneva is based on the quality of its people. But I also know a company that's very dear to me in Lausanne, a company of bioinformatics, computational biology, the goal of which is to identify important variants in the exome and the genome. And although the company is based in Lausanne, most of the scientists and programmers are in Greece. And so the company, as it was said before, is it does not have a headquarters in Greece, the Greek center. However, most of the human power and the production and the interpretation of the genomic variants is done by scientists who are sitting in the Greek territory. I like the numbers, and I like to focus on the human capital a little bit of what we're talking about as Greek and Cypriot scientists. And for this, I take the opportunity to show you a few slides, 4 or 5. I was wondering if I can have the first one.
Let me see if I can share.
No, I would like to have the one, not the composite one, but the separate ones. If it's
Can you
possible.
see that now? Can you see that?
No.
We saw a composite slide briefly, Pantelis, but I don't know if you have other components, constituent slides.
Yes, I'm trying to share the slides from my side. Let me
Thank
try
you.
again.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much. Super. So I thank you very much. So to understand what we're talking about, Greece, our country, has a ranking as of last year from this prosperity index, ranking 41 in the world. And you see the discrepancy among different sectors. And you see that in health, that's about 37. So in general, the health sector in Greece is a bit better than the general position of the country in the world. Next one, please. So although the health sector is quite healthy, the research sector, including the health research, is quite poor. So here is a map of Europe that was published in Nature about 2 years ago, and the density in the map of Europe represents the impact factor per investigator in different European countries. And you see that the center, of course, is the center of Europe, Paris, the Netherlands, the west part of Germany, and Switzerland, and also the UK. And you can see a little bit of Italy and a little bit of Spain, but you see very little of Greece. So Greece, in terms of input per investigator, if you compare this to other European science, is quite suboptimal. Next, please. On the other hand, the world has more Greek scientists than you expect given the size of Greece. In the top panel, you see 1 in 125 scientists with 5 or more publications in the last 30 years is Greek. 63,951 out of almost 8 million investigators. On the other hand, 1 in 600 of the world population is Greek, 13 million out of 7.8 billion. So there are many Greek scientists in the world, more than expected by our population. Next. All these data are from a fantastic study of John Ioannidis, a professor in Stanford, and I give you the reference if you're interested. Next, please. From all the scientists, Greek scientists, about 43%, as you see in the left panel, work in life sciences. And I focus on life sciences now. And from these life sciences, Greek names in the world, 60% are in Greece and 40% are elsewhere in the world. So the majority of the life sciences investigator mass is within mainland Greece, 60 to 40. Next, please. In spite of this, when you rank the input of Greek scientists as the median of inputs, Greece, the scientists in Greece are in position 3505, And the Greeks in diaspora, they have a median that's better than this, statistically much better than this, 28-12. So in general, the output of the Greeks in the diaspora is higher than the Greeks in Greece. Next, please. Now, this is the most crucial slide that I would like to have your attention to it. It's not complicated. It sounds complicated, but it's not. If you take the 0.1% of the top of the scientists that contribute, the best of the best, the 1 in 1,000 scientists in the world that contribute, and you take the Greeks in that category, 86.8% are in the diaspora, and the rest are in mainland Greece. The same thing is with the top 0.5%. 89.7% of top-ranking Greek scientists are in the diaspora, and the balance of this are in Greece. Now, if you go down the top 1%, top 3%, top 10%, let's go to the top 10%. In the top 10%, the Greeks in the diaspora are equal to the Greeks in Greece. So that means that for okay science, the scientists that are in Greece, they perform equally to the scientists outside in Greece. But for the super good science, most of the people are in the diaspora. So what is the message of this? Next slide, please. So there is disproportionate high number of Greek scientists in diaspora. Scientists with high impact tend to be in the diaspora rather than in Greece. Greece is rather underperforming in European science output, and the average impact scientist is equally found in the diaspora and in Greece. So in other words, to increase the science output in Greece, one needs to import, excuse me for the word, the best of the best, and not the majority and not at random of any scientist. In other words, one needs to be targeted to the high impact scientists to bring them back to Greece with whatever that requires. And these people could be role models, not only role models, but producers and doers in mainland Greece. Like I could give you the example of the Prime Minister Venizelos, Eleftherios, long time ago, that went to Germany to see the great mathematician Kara Theodori himself. And he said, come back to Greece, I will do whatever I can to help you. And he succeeded to this. So the remedies to consider, of course, the minister knows that very well: improve research funding, continuous funding, competitive funding, and not opportunistic. This year and then 3 years later and 5 years later. Improve the infrastructure, but mainly, in my humble view, is to invest in people. Thank you.
Thank you, Stylianos. You know, I think, and we've got the luxury of time, you know, to go, you know, a little bit over the hour, if that's, you know, acceptable with our panel. You know, I think, you know, again, just, you know, some fascinating viewpoints. I'd like to come back, you know, to the alternate minister, Nina Gaga, just for your thoughts. But before we do that, you know, John, I think, you know, part of that case study was also talking about big data and bioinformatics. And that's a very, very topical area of focus in innovation. So maybe just a viewpoint from your perspective, and then I'd like to come to, you know, the alternate minister, Mina Gaga, as well.
Thank you. And I apologize, I have to leave after I offer some observations. I did put my email address in the chat. And so I also put a lot of comments in the chat. But if you'd like to reach me, you can reach me there. You know, if we think about data and data science, I think this is actually a place that I'll speak for the science minister, alternative minister as well, that investment here goes hand in hand with investment in biotechnology, because really the greatest advances we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years in the health sciences are going to be driven by data and access to data, and really intelligent ways to collect, manage, analyze, and more importantly, interpret those data. But as we think about investments, what we have to do is think not just about investing in the technology, but also formulating robust questions that we can try to address using those technologies. And so for me, a big part of thinking about building this kind of ecosystem really starts with identifying those questions that we'd like to address. And in the context of developing a national strategy, or a Greek strategy spanning Greece and Cyprus, the place to try to really brainstorm is where there are unique resources that you can take advantage of, and to address specific questions. And being part of the larger European ecosystem, really where you can leverage resources and funding and other opportunities that exist within Europe. So I think there's a real opportunity to do important things if we start by asking, what are the problems we're trying to solve? And then build on that. But at the end of the day, I constantly come back to this simple idea that the best way to try to keep scientists in Greece, or to bring them back to Greece, is to focus on those opportunities that are going to give them the chance to take their discoveries and have a significant impact, and to be able to take their knowledge and understanding and do things that they feel are going to be transformative. So I want to thank everyone for inviting me today. I'm sorry I don't have time, the longer time to spend, but I've enjoyed this discussion very much. And again, I'm happy to hear from anyone if you'd like to connect with me.
Thank you, John. I appreciate
Thank you, John.
Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch for sure. Thank you.
All right.
So let me hand over to the alternate minister as well, and then I think George, you've got some comments as well. Hopefully we've got a little bit of time. I appreciate we're over time a little bit, but we've got the luxury. So please.
Okay, just a comment. And I liked what John said, but as a young doctor training in the UK, I was as I said, the National Heart and Lung Institute. At the time, it wasn't part of Imperial, it now is, but it was brand new and sort of state of the art. We had one cryostat which we had to share between 4 departments. Then I went to Groningen in the Netherlands, and there they have this huge, beautiful university hospital. The editor of the New England Journal of Medicine was with us, and he works at Harvard, and he was in awe of this hospital. I can tell you that the research lab within the hospital had 20 cryostats, and that wasn't their routine work. So it's a totally different environment. You talked about sort of Greeks in the diaspora. We have a lot of great minds, but here, what you can have as, a lab to work in and funding to work with is quite a fraction of what you can have in the Netherlands or in many other countries. So it's a difficult situation. And yes, you can have a lot of, I worked until 6 months ago, I worked as a clinician in the main lung center in Greece. So a big hospital that was also the referral center for COVID. And yes, it was great that we could talk on a daily basis with doctors and scientists around the world. We talked with the Chinese to begin with the Italians, with the Germans. We exchanged knowledge, and this helped a lot. But it doesn't give you the means to do research, and it doesn't give you the technology to do research. It also doesn't give you the salaries that people can have in other countries to stay here and work. So there are a lot of, and I guess Cyprus is in a different standpoint, but I mean, things are quite different there as well. It's a small country with less opportunity than a country like Belgium, which is also a small country, but it's at the center of Europe with lots of people coming and going, and the ability to attract people because of the EU, because of the funding for research. It's a totally different story. So I think we need to take it a step at a time and think of what we can do, how we can have the exchange of scientists and medics and all that, but also slowly at least create an environment where people will want to build their lives and bring out and sort of help their careers and their output within the country. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate the viewpoint. George, I know that you've got some comments, so I want to give you the time.
I'll be very brief. I know we're over time. So I want to come back to the fact that the way I believe we could go forward is to leverage people in positions of being able to catalyze training programs, scientific exchanges in Europe and to some extent the US, given what I've just said earlier, that it is possible to do things at a distance, to try and create ways of back and forth for Greek and Cypriot scientists to centers of excellence so that they can harness expertise, they can learn, they can bring things back, they can find the steps in the ladder from innovation to translation. So I'm overall optimistic. I would like to see this Cyprus Cancer Research Institute to do something like that by way of like proof of principle. And I'd be very happy to interact with anyone who wants to take part with this institute, because it is cancer, but cancer research relies on basic biology. So any way in which people think they can contribute or modify the model or contribute to this model of exchange and help from a distance, then I'd be very interested to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Absolutely, and I agree. We talked about the ecosystem. I think we're all very, very sort of bullish around, that continuum and collaboration, that level of support and investment, and we have a lot to give. And I think that's the exciting part. How do we continue to build upon that, on that baseline? And I think the alternate ministers also made some of those, those points as well, very practically. I want to be respectful and maybe, Sophia, Stylianos, maybe you've got some final thoughts as we kind of wrap up the discussion here. I think it's been interactive and insightful. We can go on for many hours, which is, fantastic. And it's all about, really giving, our young scientists the opportunity to thrive and to develop and to aspire. And we need to help and support them as best we can within that ecosystem. But Sophia, please, maybe some final thoughts from your side.
Thank you. I agree with all of the points I hear, and Professor Antonarakis' point is excellent, and Professor Vasiliou's. I really want to kind of bring that together from my perspective, in that I do follow what goes on in Greece, and I see some pockets of excellence, which are really fantastic, and I'm really in awe of what these people can accomplish within the environment that they are in and the opportunities they're given. But what I think we might want to do is less about funding and more about bringing people together and making conversations, instead of pockets of excellence, to make centers of excellence. And this is the foundation by which innovation and entrepreneurship can really thrive in Greece. And I think there are practical things we can do. For example, we can organize programs, and they're not that difficult to do. Exchange programs, so that international exchange programs, so students can come from abroad to Greece and vice versa. They can bring skills back to Greece, and part of the scholarship is to return to Greece, to their original base, to exercise some of this knowledge that they have acquired. Second, perhaps some more summer schools and symposia that are focused on important elements of Greek research that can really help Greek scientists in Greece. And also potentially, and we're doing it abroad already, we bring in visiting professors for a certain period of time to teach students, to inspire young people in other universities in different countries. And this can actually happen relatively readily. And will offer opportunities to really inspire young people and to really engage Greek scientists in Greece with scientists abroad. Many of the success stories I see in Greece are people who have tapped into this international community, and they're really engaging with the community and bring the outcomes in Greece. And I guess I would agree with our previous speakers as well, that we have a no-brainer here in Greece. We have big data, artificial intelligence, computational biology, these things can be really the foundation of this, which are less difficult, for example, than having to really kit out very expensive labs and bring in very special skills in that way. There's a lot of talent in Greece that we can take advantage of. And I think it's a starting point. We also have a very well-informed, very strong medical community, academic clinicians who can really help here as well. Clinical research and then moving towards the trials as well. I think these are two areas we can really expand and really work on to develop the foundations for what can be an amazing ecosystem. We have really already the talent in place, and I think it's time that we bring it together. I can tell you from being abroad, Greece is having a moment right now abroad. People are really looking to Greece for many things, and I think it's time that we all step up to do our bit for our country. I would like to stop here and ask here to hear your points as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it resonates absolutely. We've got that, that true philosophical drive and skill and belief. How do we translate that to very practical terms? And it is a complex ecosystem, but I agree with you. I think that we've got a lot that we can offer, as part of that, framework and infrastructure. So thank you for those. Thank you for those thoughts. Ilianos, maybe to you, just for your final thoughts, maybe. You're on mute.
I've nothing to add. Everything was said so eloquently and so nicely. I would like to add the one thing that although our country has many islands, but Greece is not an island and is not isolated from the rest of Europe. And I would like to think as a Greek contributes to European science. So in other words, we're not competing with our European friends and cohabitants of this continent, but we're working together. However, we need to excel ourselves to be leaders in some areas, not on everything, but focus on some areas in which we become the center of Europe. And I hope the next generation will have a couple of Nobel Prizes too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ilianos, and thank you for sharing those, those data and those metrics. I want to give the final word to our alternate minister. So, any final words from yourself, please, Minister.
Thank you. I'm very happy I was part of this panel today, and I hope you can all have an input in sort of the things we want to do in Greece and the way we want to bring people in contact with you, but also build something here that will keep young people in research, in innovation, and sort of help them strive and help them move abroad, but also help them move back into the country. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thank you. So before I hand over to Krisa, I wanted to just personally thank and acknowledge the time and the attention to the panel discussion, from our alternate minister, but also to every panel member. It's been an honor for me personally, and and again, I look forward to continued engagement, collaboration, and supporting, our young scientists from a Greece and a Cyprus perspective. So, Krisa, I'll hand over to you just to
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you very much. And Dr. Theocharos, I will start with you. I would really like to thank you for moderating this insightful discussion. It's always a pleasure to hear you moderating sessions and discussions. So I will start by thanking the alternate minister, Mina Gaga, for giving us the picture of the academic situation in Greece regarding the attraction of the Greek scientists and performing clinical trials here, and some important points that she made on what should we take into consideration to improve the situation. Of course, Professor Sofia Karagiannis for pointing out the obvious missing link of academia and industry in Greece and Cyprus, and of course her thoughts on how the interaction of scientists abroad can support to achieve the goals of creating centers of excellence here in Greece. Professor George Vasiliou for his thoughts on establishing the methods that the expertise, will, and talent of the scientists should be taken into consideration in order to make them return. And of course, for his thoughts on the intellectual, the development of the intellectual ecosystem that does not necessarily have to be physical, it can be virtual in order to create ways to make this ecosystem. And of course, Professor Stylianos Donarakis, who raised an important point in the beginning. He shared his experience and he said that it's important to have by your side colleagues that are better than you in order to develop research. And of course, he pointed out that we have the human capital, and with a lot of contribution in the scientific community, we just have to find a way to take advantage or use, let's use this word, this capital. And of course, Professor John Quirkenbus, who raised the point on how significant it is to collect the data and apply them for a cause, and actually to invest and formulate robust questions in the beginning in order to know how can you use this technology and then go on and advancing that, developing that. So thank you all very much. At this point, I have to tell that the time has come to draw the symposium to an end. We all live optimistic for the future of the Greek Scientist Society with more ideas and insights for further progress for this ecosystem. And of course, it's in our hands to improve education, facilitate the innovation, and advocate for investments to facilitate this drive. Thank you everyone for joining us today and making this exchange of ideas possible. We would like also to thank Mr. Theophanis Zacharis for organizing and facilitating the connection of all the Greek scientists in Greece, Cyprus, and diaspora. Special thank you to, of course, to all our erudite panelists and to our skillful moderators for an excellent discussion. We look forward to seeing you in our next Greek Scientist Society Symposium. Please stay tuned and thank you for supporting